way back from Mars. 15, there's still time for you, time to buy and time to lose. At 15, there's never a wish better than this. When you've only got 100 years to live. I'm 33 for a moment, still a man, but you see I'm of age, a kid on the way, babe, a family on my mind. I'm 45 for a moment, the sea is high and I'm heading into a crisis, chasing the years of my life. 15, there's still time for you, time to buy and time to lose yourself within a morning star. 15, I'm alright with you. 15, there's never a wish better than this. When you've only got 100 years to live, as time goes by, suddenly you're wise, another blink of an eye. 67 is gone, the sun is getting high, we're moving on. I'm 99 for a moment, dying for just another moment, and I'm still dreaming, counting the ways to where you are. 15, there's still time for you. 22, I feel it too. 33, you're on your way. Every day's a new day. Better than this. When you've only got 100 years to live.
Good morning. I am Reverend Tom Capo, the minister here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church, and today we will consider how we, as spiritual seekers, might withstand and learn from life's many transitions. I offer this poem by Unitarian Universalist Reverend Manish Mishra Marzetti. The ground shifts, sometimes slowly, sometimes like an earthquake, reminding us that the solidity we often love and seek is an illusion. The crumbling dust of the desert plains, the moist fertility of farmlands, the ending coastline of tidal shores are all changing. Committees dissolve and are recreated, leaders retire or step away, ministers come and go, bylaws are amended. New experiences lead to new truths, which foster evolution. The natural course of life, always pushing us toward greater understandings of what it means to be human. Everything about our existence points toward change, toward flexibility, toward dynamic recreation. And it's hard because change involves loss. Can we hold the losses well while not holding ourselves back? The grounds shift, sometimes slowly, sometimes like an earthquake. Nothing is static.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me in saying our mission statement, which is printed in your order of service and projected to my right. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world for fairness, love, and compassion. Please join together in singing hymn number 354 in the gray hymnal, We Laugh, We Cry. The words will be projected to my right.
The following poem, What Happens When We Stop Living, was written by UU Reverend Nathan Walker. The question is not, what happens when we die? Nobody really knows. The real question is this: what happens when we stop living? The stoicism we face on a daily basis is a symptom of a larger illness called a dually dulled life. Our lives can be hypnotized by the monotonous commutes, multiplied by the flickering fluorescent light that falls upon the micromanaging boss who thinks everything you do in your cubicle is an extension of his or her power. Who here is dying a slow and numbing death? There's no time to be lulled by monotony. There is no time to be blaming other people for our own feelings. If you don't like it, change it. There's no time for crying or complaining or gossiping or clinging to that fashionable grudge bag. No, it is time to wake up, to rise up, and to carry ourselves into a day worth living. Let us live one day, this day, with passion and a sense of collective synergy. Let us live one day, this day, by asking questions that truly challenge us and make us feel alive. For today's question is not, what happens when we die? It is, what happens when we stop living?
The following prayer is adapted from prayers by Unitarian Universalist ministers Reverend Julia Hamilton, Reverend Lynn Cox, and Reverend Amy Zucker Morgenstern. I chose to develop this meditation or prayer from these three prayers because they each speak with a different voice about facing life's transitions. And so now I invite you into a time of prayer, meditation, reflection, to be fully present here and now in this sacred time and space within yourselves, with each other, and with all that is larger than ourselves.
Spirit of life, remind us that we are not alone in history. Ignite us with courage. Remind us that we are not alone in entering the future. Anchor us with patience and perseverance. Remind us that we are not alone in our times of grief and pain. Comfort us with your Spirit, manifest in human hands and voices. Remind us that we are not alone in joy and wonder. Inspire us to honor and extend the beauty we find in this world.
Dear God, you are in the in-between spaces of our lives, where one hand reaches to touch another, where eyes meet across the crowd and confusion and find understanding, where the spark leaps from one mind to ignite another. When we are in the in-between, on our way from the intolerable to the unknown, when we defy the categories that some in society invent and dare to imagine something beyond, when we seek others who are on the journey, on the threshold, on the margins, in the shimmering intersections of our lives, when we listen to the possibilities whispered within and step into mystery with trust, with fear, with trembling. May we find peace, for we dwell in sacred space.
Spirit of hope, settle into our bones this morning. Remind us once again that the dawn light is never a gamble. If there ever was a sure bet, it is the sunrise. Even stones crumble, even grief changes and shifts, and death is a mystery that is certain but not solid. But hope is like the sunrise, eternal and bone bred within us. We are creatures built by sunshine and cannot carve this hope out of our bones if we tried. And yet people have tried to entomb the light, tried to seal off the morning. But still, the sun rises and calls her children into bloom. Always, she says, always I will return. So don't despair. All is not lost.
Amen. Namaste. Blessed be.
Starting that over. Sorry. And one day sets out alone on the highway, more to see what's before him than to run away. But years of looking forward and headed for the door could leave a mark on any man and leave him wanting more. But the feeling that surrounds me brings a heart back from the stone. It shines a light that lets me see to cross the 7 bridges home. Now I've lost my place. Life's sometimes a battle. You just try to get what you're after. A world full of stories you won't live to tell. But going on is all we know, like rivers always flow. Still, it seems the years just fly right past, while the days go by so slow. But the feeling that surrounds me brings the heart back from the stone. It shines a light that lets me see to cross the 7 bridges home. And it goes on like this forever, so don't ever feel alone. The same old road that brought you here crosses 7 bridges home. A man knows that one day there's always an end to the highway. He knows that before him he won't run away, because the way is never far enough and freedom's just a bluff. Still from somewhere down deep inside comes the peace you've only dreamed of. But the feeling that surrounds brings the heart back from the stone and shines a light that lets me see to cross the 7 bridges home. And it goes on like this forever, so don't ever feel alone. The same old road that brought you here crosses 7 bridges home. Oh, the same old road that brought you here crosses 7 bridges home.
From the Jewish Bible, book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them up. A time to embrace and a time to refrain. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace.
From birth to death, we face innumerable transitions. Transitions in our personal, professional, familial, communal lives. Transitions are the space between the no longer, the end of something, and the change, whatever the completion of that change might be. How we manage these in-between spaces can affect our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. I preached on transitions about 2 years ago, but in this age of Trump, I have seen people having more difficulty with the in-between times. This may be because our emotional resources are taxed by the political situation we find ourselves in. The stresses from Washington and Springfield are affecting our daily lives. They're affecting our relationships, the people we care about, the causes that are important to us, in acutely uncomfortable ways that we have not experienced before. With so much of our personal resources, our emotional resiliency being battered in our daily lives, it can become easy to be dulled to the changes in our own personal lives, our own personal in-between spaces. They can become lost under the onslaught of so much uncertainty in our world. So I thought I would talk again about transitions today. Perhaps we all need, myself included, a little reminder that difficult times are transitory, that we have people who support us as the ground beneath our feet seems to shift, and that we've all faced transitions in the past and successfully found our way through them. And one more thing. For each turning, each change, each transition, we have the opportunity to grow.
Bohemian Austrian poet and novelist Rainer Maria Rilke counseled in his letters to a young poet, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer."
I'm going to share with you today a personal transitional experience. It may be difficult for some to hear and may have some triggering language for people who've been through very difficult experiences. So please take care of yourself. If you hear something that is difficult and you wish to step out, please know that you can. Don't sit here and feel like you have to if something really strikes something inside you. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My father was a binge drinker. That means he didn't drink all the time. There were just these isolated incidents when he drank. And when he drank, he didn't just drink a few drinks, he drank until he was highly intoxicated. And when he was intoxicated, he would either become the life of the party, or he'd fall asleep, or he would rage. And his rage was frightening. I remember clearly one incident that still haunts me. He was angry about something, I don't even remember what it was. We were all huddled, my mother, my brothers, and I, in fear in a back room of the house. While my father broke most of the dishes in the house, broke the baffles off the bar, and broke some chairs, all the time yelling profanely. Hiding from that destructive storm of alcohol-fueled rage, I made a decision. I would no longer have any relationship with my father. I would no longer value anything he did or said to me, and I could never forgive him. And at least part of me felt like he did not deserve my forgiveness. He had wounded me, terrified me and my family, and I could not, in my heart, let go of that. I was deeply troubled. My world was turned upside down. How could I go forward when I no longer knew who I was? This was the first major transition in my life that I had to face. And it hit me with the force of a hurricane. And I was only 10 years old.
Prize-winning and best-selling author and journalist Nina George wrote, "Do you know that there's a halfway world between each ending and each new beginning? It's a bog. It's where your dreams and worries and forgotten plans gather. Your steps are heavier during that time. Don't underestimate the transition between farewell and new departure. Give yourself the time that you need. Some thresholds are too wide to be taken in one stride."
Transitions are not always related to changes in career or physical or psychological development or changes in our family structure. Sometimes transitions occur when we experience or have experienced multiple things that change us in some way. An experience that impacts us in terms of no longer, leaving us in a space of not yet. Not being sure where we're headed, how long it will take to get there, and often facing a threshold so wide that we don't know where it will end. This in-between place can be like an unreachable itch that needs to be scratched, like that's something that's on your peripheral vision, always distracting you, perhaps even like an open wound that's slow to heal. Now, I realize that not all transitions are painful or traumatic. Graduations are joyful, weddings, births, becoming financially independent. Perhaps, though, there are people here this morning who find themselves stranded on a seemingly endless threshold of not yet. Having been there myself, this is what I would share. Tell someone your thoughts, your feelings. Tell someone you trust, someone who loves you, someone who's willing to listen to your pain. In giving voice to that which has impacted your soul, you can gain perspective. You can rediscover hope. You can deepen your connections so that you are not standing alone on that threshold. You don't have to be in that bog alone. An unshared burden over time will have negative effects on your health and will strain the resources that you have. And as probably many of you have experienced, transitions cannot always be accomplished in one step, one stride. My issues with my father required many steps, many people to support me, and a willingness to risk personal growth on my part. I know that no one's bog is the same as anyone else's, and that everyone here, in one form or fashion, carries different things in their grudge bag. But sharing the ways each of us made it through that time of no longer and over the threshold of not yet can be of value to each and every one of us. And that's why I'm sharing my story this morning. And so I began. I had to face my resentments. I had to get into my grudge bag. You see, I put so many things in there. My resentments, yes, but also my guilt. Was my father's drinking about something that I did? As the oldest child, should I have protected my mother or my brothers? I held all these feelings tightly inside, where they festered, unresolved for years. The negative energy leached into my thoughts, my actions, my words, my relationships, tainting everything around me. Perhaps you've heard this. I wish I had heard it many years ago. That holding on to a resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person will die. Resentments never hurt the one that you're angry with. They only hurt you. Resentments over my father's drinking hurt me for many years. My esteem was damaged. My connection with other people was damaged. My health was damaged. My ability to succeed in school because of these resentments and this guilt. And yet I wouldn't let go. You might ask why, and I can tell you rationally what I thought at the time, which wasn't all that rational. I felt he deserved my resentments because there was no justification for what he did. And I didn't feel he regretted it. At least I didn't feel he regretted it as much as I think he needed to regret it. He kept me from having a safe home to grow up in. But I wanted to get out of this transition. And I had to start somewhere if I was to walk out of my bog. I had to admit I didn't want to feel pain anymore. I wanted to stop feeling so disconnected from what we call in Unitarian Universalism the interdependent web of all existence. And if I was to do that, I had to be willing to risk trusting someone besides myself to deal with this. I had to take the chapter that my father had written in my life and rework it, reframe it, so that I could take my story back. But yet I still held on for some time. Those resentments had some dark advantages for me. Perks. Holding on to my resentment made me feel like I had a secret power or superiority over my father. My pain made me feel special. I was a victim, and people could take care of me. In the middle of my bog of resentment, with no particular desire to move on, I was able to objectify my father, to make him an it, a thing, a nothing. And since he was a nothing, I didn't have to think about his feelings or even think about him as someone who needed help. He was a thing. I could do whatever hurtful thing I wanted to him because a thing didn't have feelings. But I wanted to move on. I needed to move on. I knew that inside. But it was hard. I had to turn inside out my grudge bag, shake out all of its contents, and examine each and every one of those painful thoughts and emotions. Psychotherapist Dan Carl wrote, "Forgiveness means releasing your emotions concerning injustices that you've experienced. It means releasing the self-image of yourself as a victim of unfair treatment and deciding to instead be a person who has grown through and beyond a serious challenge to his well-being. It means ceasing to replay events in your mind in ways that reclaim that trauma and recreate it inside, feeling that pain and fear over and over, recreating the experience of victimization. But I wanted it to cease. I chose to share my pain with those I loved and trusted, my wife, my friends, some of my colleagues in psychotherapy, and even, eventually, my father.
Karen Baccaran works full-time as a radiation therapist, specializing in oncology. However, her real passion is for writing. Karen uses her writing to help others connect with their truth and learn unconditional love of the self in order to love others. She writes, "Your soul awakens your mind makes your choices. Your choices manifest your life. Your life is your lesson. Your lessons create wisdom. Your wisdom enriches your soul."
Just after I finished my bachelor's degree, my father asked if we could work on our relationship. He was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and wanted to make amends to me. I was ready to begin a process of venting, forgiving, reconciliation, partly because it was safe to do so now. If he were still drinking, I'm not sure I would have made the same decision. After doing forgiveness work on my own, and then meeting with my father and doing some reconciliation work, you might say I was finished. However, transitions are not often like that. As I said, they can be in stages, steps. And sometimes we might not even be aware that there are steps yet to take. In 1990, I wrote an article for a professional journal called About Fathering. In the article, I mentioned my father. I said I didn't have any positive feelings about him, even though I had forgiven him. Well, you know, we all have kind of our blind spots. And so I sent a copy to my parents, proud to share this achievement. I'm in a professional journal. Well, my father read the article, and he was quite hurt and wanted to discuss my childhood and our relationship. We chose a time and place to meet, and we talked about my childhood. And I did more forgiveness, and I did more reconciliation, and something shifted inside me. Soon after the meeting, I found myself beginning to remember gifts my father had given me and things that he had taught me that I value in my life. Somehow these things were hidden within me, blocked by my resentments, guilt, pain. I remembered how he was the one who stayed up late on Christmas morning putting together train sets and forts, and how we shared the next morning those wonderful toys that he had created. And I remembered how important it was that he taught me how to work on cars, how to change oil, batteries, starters, so many things. As I remembered all of these things, I began being willing to turn to him for his wisdom. He had finally stopped being a thing, a nothing to me, and I was able to see him as a person. Your mind makes decisions, your mind makes choices, your choices manifest in your life is your lesson, your lessons create wisdom, your wisdom enriches your soul. This is the process of moving through transitions in a healthy way. We all do it. You make choices which manifest in no longers in your life. The choices then manifest in emotions, in your relationships, in your health, in other choices you make beyond that time. Think of your life as a web made up of strands of no longers and new truths, of dynamic recreations and questions. Each and every choice, each and every no longer offers you the opportunity to learn about yourself, to learn about others, to learn more about the resources you have in your life. And with each and every learning, you grow in wisdom and your soul is enriched. So I say to you, hold on your losses well, but don't hold yourself back. Don't be lulled by monotony. Don't waste your precious time blaming others for your own feelings. Wake up, rise up, and carry yourself every day into a day worth living. And so may you do so.
In the eye of a hurricane, there is quiet. For just a moment, yellow skies. Those song lyrics have been swirling around in my head for like the last 2 weeks, and they just seem to stick this morning. Whether you are outside the hurricane looking in, whether you are inside the hurricane struggling just to get by, or whether you happen to find yourself this morning in a moment of peace in the eye of the hurricane. This morning's offering for the work of this church will now be given and received.
And now we extinguish our chalice. As we do so, let us remember that none of us cope with life's transitions alone. We as a community are here to support each other. And at times, we need to lean on one another. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and let us sing our closing hymn, 1021, in the teal hymnal, Lean on Me. The words will be projected to my right.
We
We end the service with these words by Unitarian Universalist Eric Walker Wickstrom. If you are who you are, if you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who he or she was, if nothing has changed in this church since the day you came in here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church or temple, zendo or mosque, is to help people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, and in the other, whoever that might be, or however hard it is to be with the other. Because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from this morning not who you were, but as who you could be. So may you do so. Now I invite you to turn around and greet one another, especially those you don't know. Let us share the love of this community with one another.